in the top right corner, it says view. If you go all the way up in there.
Yes. Okay. And so
And then
click
you
at
have
the
the
speaker
speaker
view.
view and gallery view.
All
So if you
right.
click on speaker view, when somebody's talking, it will let them take up the full screen.
All right. Cool deal. All right. So do we have a moderator?
No one volunteered.
So does that mean, Janet, that you want to be our moderator?
No, no ma'am. No ma'am. No ma'am.
Well, I figured, Kim, since you're the one who can control who's muted and not muted and all that stuff, and I don't know if you can see when people are waving or and all that business.
Well, I can only see who's talking. And if I do the speaker view, I can only see who's talking. But
You could toggle it on and off, couldn't you? After an question has been answered.
oh, I don't know.
And that works.
I guess I can do that. I guess I can do that. Okay, well, let's see here.
So many good ideas.
I know. There's too much.
This is a good peanut gallery.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so once we get a question, when let's just put it this way. If you've got a question for somebody, if you will unmute with you when you have a question, if you have it for everybody, just say for everybody. If you have it for a particular person, say that first, and then that way I'll make sure that I can get it to speaker view right then. How about that? Okay.
Sounds like a plan.
Sounds like fun.
And if you do not have a question, let's stay muted. If everybody knows how to mute, and all you have to do is come down to the bottom bar, and on the far left, you've got a little microphone, and just click mute, and we'll all just self-regulate unless somebody gets out of hand, and then I will mute you. I will get
Oh
up
my gosh.
and I will mute you like nobody's business. No. I'm a mom. I'm a boy mom, so I know how to do
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So do we have, let me make sure I'm recording, right? Okay, we are. So do we have a, actually, why don't we go ahead and introduce ourselves? Linda, why don't you go first?
Oh, okay. I'm Linda Broday. I write Western historical romances. My book, next book coming out in April. April will be 32. So I'm busy, always. So I've been a member of PPW since 2002. So been around a long time. I'm old. And I'm getting tired.
Well, thank you, Linda. How about Ryan? Let's go next.
All right. My name is Ryan McSwain. I write weird fiction. I haven't been as active in the Texas High Plains Writers since the pandemic started as I should have been. But I appreciate you letting me come in and chat with y'all. I have 2 books out, and I have several more eternally on the way. So hopefully now that we're getting back to normal a little bit at a time, I can get those projects finished and out there for people. So thank you for having me.
Cool. Thanks. How about Rick? Treon.
Hi, everybody. I am your president of the Texas High Plains Writers. I write thrillers and suspenseful fiction. Unfortunately, my books thus far have been a little harder to categorize, which I am working on fixing. And I have 2 coming out this summer. One in June called Divided States. It's more of an action thriller. And then in August will be the second in my Bartholomew Beck series called The Price of Silence. And they will be my 3rd and 4th novel to be published. And I am working on finishing up both, and both of my editors are probably wishing that I was working on them right now instead of doing this, but I would much rather be talking to you fine folks.
Thank you, Ricky. And I'm Kim Black, and I have 6 novels published. I'm just trying to make sure. I've got 6 novels that I've got published. I've got 2 more that will come out this year. I've got another one that I'm working on right now that's a little bit different. I like to do everything different. If y'all don't know, I've got my first 2 novels are Christian historical fiction. Then I've got a trilogy of spy, semi-cozy spy suspense books, and then I have a sci-fi western, space western. And then the 2 that I've got coming out, one is a contemporary noir, and the other one is a historical western horror. So it's a little bit different. And the ones that I'm working on right now is a very traditional, I think, sort of semi-traditional mystery, Agatha Christie, Hitchcock type mystery. So anyway, that's what I'm doing. And Linda, you didn't mention that you are a New York Times and USA Today bestseller.
Oh, yeah. I'm a New York Times and USA Today bestselling author.
Yeah. I don't think the rest of us.
And all that means is a lot more hard work. That's all it means.
Well, it was hard work that got you into that mess in the first place, I think.
Oh, yeah.
This is true.
It did.
This is true. All right. So I'm just gonna throw this out there. Does anybody have a question for anybody in particular or for the whole panel? We had a couple of questions that were submitted on the Facebook page ahead of time. But if anybody's got their own questions right now, let's go ahead and get those. You can unmute and ask.
Just for anybody on the panel, what's your view of deep POV? Is the time past for that? I feel guilty about adverbs these days. I have an LY on my wall with a slash through it.
Does anybody else want to take that first?
Okay, so you're asking about POV, if it's still used, if the
No,
way
I
it's
understand
built
it's still used. My
Oh,
concern is
okay.
there seems to have been a ban issued from somewhere
Oh,
on LY.
oh.
Oh, well,
I don't know. I'm not aware. I think I've been hiding in a cave.
is that 2 questions? Is that adverbs and deep point of view?
Well, I think one's tied. I think one's tied to the other. The supposition is that your POV work is not as meaningful if you slow it down with adverbs. I guess that's kind of putting it in the
okay. I know taking out adverbs usually just speeds things up. I wouldn't say to complete, there may be a time for them, but I know that in my writing and most of the writing that I enjoy, it just seems to slow things down. It's one of those things you can cut out, like the word that. Just doing some Control V and getting those things out of there seems to really kind of streamline the writing. And it also, it helps you to dwell on things less, at least in my opinion. Rick, do you find the same thing in your writing?
Yeah, and one of the reasons to not use as many adverbs is to find better verbs. So instead of, somebody walked slowly, maybe they strolled, maybe they meandered, maybe they crept, that sort of thing, and helping to, make the prose. Yes, exactly.
Yes.
And it makes the picture come alive in the
Yes.
reader's mind, which, I guess it was Stephen King who said the story should start in the author's head and end in the reader's head. So the more descriptive your verbs can be, the better. And what Ryan was saying, cutting out words makes people, get through the book a little faster and helps them to not dwell on the fact that there's a bunch of words in front of them, but helps turn them into the mental image that you're trying to create in the reader's mind.
Mm.
I agree. I'm listening to a series of books right now, which it's a really cute series, but in the tradition of like Agatha Christie and everything, there's a whole lot of, he asked archly.
Yes.
I don't know what archly looks like. I don't know how you ask something archly. So, so that's one of those things that if you're going to use an adverb, make sure that it's something that has a visual with it. That's how I feel about it. If you're going to use one, use it effectively and make it work.
I really like Rick's point about better verbs. And I think that expands. I work really hard with my adjectives. I found that lazy adjectives don't serve a purpose, especially words like small and big and large. They're really boring. And I've been trying to make sure that I don't let any of those pass my second draft. So just adding that in.
That's a good point. That's a good point to make.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was about to say, I thought I interrupted someone. So I interrupted you again. So I'm going to mute myself here.
No. I just wanted to say that on deep point of view, you need to eliminate your saidisms. You need to watch for words like felt. He felt, he watched, he touched, he instead just say he reached out for the I don't know a good example right now, but just go ahead with whatever you were going to say and not use those filler words, and that's what they are, is fillers. So, and that puts you deeper into the story. You feel like you're there. So that's kind of what I do.
I like deep point of view. I like to take out as many saids and tags as you possibly can, as long as it's clear who the speaker is. And, as long as the reader knows what's going on, I think that, clarity is key. And then after that, take out all the words you possibly can.
I agree. Just tighten.
Exactly. What the Facebook question that was put on, one of the Facebook questions that was put on there was also about point of view. So I thought maybe we would carry through on that. It's just talking about, was asking, let me see if I can get exactly the question, but they were asking about the voices of the different people and how to be clear on point of view, and how many points of view should be in a book. And also, and I think what they're asking is how to distinguish when you change point of views. Do you, do you start a new chapter? Do you separate that within the same chapter with a page break? Or, how do you do that? Or do you just make it one point of view? So I'm going to throw that back out to the panel. They were not specific to one person.
Well, anyone who's read Let the Guilty Pay, the book I released last year, knows that I have quite a few points of view, and I mix first person and third person. And I also have excerpts from a true crime novel, which in itself is almost a narrator. So the one thing I would say is that you can do whatever you want as long as you make it clear for the reader. And you know, a lot of times following a pattern works, which is kind of how it worked in that book. Because I had first person that didn't have any kind of character label up at the top, and then the book excerpts and the third person that was happening in the past, they had like, you know, whoever the character was at the top, and then also a time when it was happening. And you know, I haven't had anyone complain that they couldn't follow or didn't know what was happening. A more traditional way to do it, though, is like, you know, Tom Clancy would be a really classic example, because, you know, he had, you know, 100 characters in his books, and each one was separated by a page break. You don't have to, within a chapter, you obviously, I mean, I suppose you could put a character label at the top of each scene, but that would be kind of weird. So you just have to make it clear in the first sentence whose point of view you're in. And sometimes in my first book, what I did is I tried hard, like, you know, and especially if you're writing an active voice, you can literally start each chapter with the character's name. You know, Ricky did this, Linda did that at the beginning of each scene, so that they immediately know whose point of view they're in. Now, this last book that I finished, that's going to come out in June, I actually, each chapter is its own point of view, and I labeled it as such at the top. And then if, you know, there were scenes within each chapter, I did a scene break, but I didn't put a dash or the 3 asterisks or anything in between them to show that there wasn't a change in point of view. Just, you know, we skipped over some time, like, you know, we'd skipped the drive from one location to another. But, you know, really, the best way to figure out how you want to represent your points of view, I think, is to read books, read widely, but also if you're going to write in a particular genre, like if you're going to write, you know, spy fiction, then, you know, read that and see how, you know, the contemporary authors are doing that. And as far as how many, you know, some authors like Mr. Clancy could do, you know, just so many. It was, you'd have to have a list 2 pages long if you wanted to keep track of them. But he made it work because he was one heck of a writer. I think most people would say 6 is about the most that people can keep track of in their head. Or you can do a character list at the front if you have a lot of them. And some people who write spy fiction do that, because you have 4 people from China, 4 people from America, 4 people from Venezuela or wherever. But yeah, like, generally speaking, if you want to adhere to your genre conventions and read books that you want to write, like, you know, that's always the best place to get started, I think.
Yeah, when I was doing my my spy trilogy, my Little Black Dress trilogy, I have 4 points of view that carry over through all 3 books. And I had some really good advice from another writer friend of mine that said, at the beginning of each chapter, and they each have, the chapters are completely separate, but at the beginning of each chapter, you start the sentence from that person's point of view and their mindset. So I've got one guy that his point of view is computer geek. So he notices computer things and those details. I've got one that's former Army, and when he goes in, you know, it's his point of view, because the first thing that you see is he's scanning the room of wherever he is. You know, whereas my main character, she's a fashion model turned spy. So she's looking at what people are wearing, how people are standing and things like that. And so, you know, I established that right off the bat, what they notice in the first sentence of the chapter is going to determine whose point of view that is. So.
And that goes to a bigger point of each POV should, each character whose head you're in should have their own distinct voice. And of course, you know, that what is voice? Well, we could talk for 4 hours about what voice is, but a lot of it is what Kim was talking about, what they notice, what they see, how their internal monologue develops. Do they use specific words, or do they have phrases that they use, you know, over and over, and that comes through in both their dialogue and in their point of view. So if one character, consciously doesn't say y'all because they don't want to sound like a redneck, let's say, then when they're speaking in another character's point of view, you have to make sure that that comes out as well. So that, it's, and you have to do that by revision. I think, each time you go through another revision of your manuscript, you have to be aware of the making sure each character sounds distinct in the prose and the way that you're writing them. And that also helps the reader, even if they don't notice it, as long as, you do that correctly, then it's not going to hold them up and not going to take them out of the story, which is your ultimate goal when writing a novel.
Linda, I saw you trying to jump in.
Why?
I saw you trying to jump in.
Yeah.
What did you have to say?
I'm trying. Okay. I almost always use 2 points of view, one for the hero, one for the heroine. But there, on occasion, it's pretty rare, but I have gone into the villain's point of view when I needed to get information that I couldn't get out any other way. So I have done that, but almost always I stick to just 2 points of view. I laughed at James Robert Waller when he wrote Bridges in Madison County, and he gave everybody a point of view, even the dog and the cat. Everybody had a point of view. I think the rocks outside the house had one, but it was, but it, he sold 1 million books. So I don't know if there's a wrong way or a right way. It's what's right for you and what your publisher wants. That's what it comes down to. So, but I kind of like clean writing. And if you put a whole lot of points of view, I don't know. For me, it doesn't work.
One thing I wanted to add is this, one of the scariest parts about when you start writing is sharing your work with other people. But I think the best possible way that you can see if people can follow your point of views is just to have people read it. And what is extremely clear to you isn't always extremely clear to your reader, because they don't have, they haven't lived it like you have. So I just recommend sharing it with other people and getting feedback, especially from a variety of people who will be honest with you. And you'll know pretty quickly if you're being clear or not. So Summer, I saw you wanted to say something.
I have a question for the entire panel. How do you determine who gets a point of view, especially when it comes to side characters?
Linda, do you have a good?
Well, I don't give my side characters a point of view, so I can't really answer that. Maybe one of the others can do better.
I have done that in several of my books. I find that when it comes to point of view, I think the rule of cool, whatever the most interesting person to have the point of view is typically who I would want to give it to. And also especially if you are going to do something like, I always worry when one of my favorite side characters gets a spotlight on them, because I know when I put a spotlight on a side character, it means I'm about to murder them. And I want you to care about that first. So, and I'm definitely the person who I always want to know what happened to that side character. Why aren't they, what happened to them? Where are they now? So it's just, I would say whoever's the most interesting person to give it to, as well as whoever you want the reader to connect with, point of view is generally one of the best ways to do that. So that doesn't always have to be first person, obviously, but it's however you decide to do it, it should be just be intentional about it for sure. How about you, Rick?
One of the rules of thumb, Ryan said the most interesting character. Another way to phrase that would be the character that has the most to lose, usually emotionally. It can be the character who's about to die. It can be the character who's going to have to wrestle with whether or not to pull the trigger. So it depends on who you think is going to be the most emotionally affected by that scene. And of course, the other thing, if you're writing, I think you mentioned a spy novel, sometimes you have to get information to the reader that your other point of view characters won't be able to see. So that's another way to do it. It just, you have to try to make sure you don't only go into one character's point of view one time, unless it is just for the scene where they're about to get murdered, like Brian said. And in terms of side characters, yeah, your protagonist is who you start the book with, and usually who you end the book with. In those 2 points of view, but you can have several different points of view and make those characters three-dimensional. You just have to make sure that you don't have one of your side characters overshadow the protagonist. And if that ends up happening during the writing process, maybe you have to switch to that person's story if they're more interesting, and frame the novel through and make them the protagonist. I've heard of authors having to do that because a lot of times our side characters are more interesting because they serve a specific purpose. They are the funny one, or they're the especially tragic one. So you just have to pick your poison. Do you want to get in their head and make them more interesting than your protagonist, or do you want to have the reader care about what's going on in that scene, and they're the one most emotionally affected?
Yeah, I agree with everything that y'all said. That I kind of picked my point of view characters based on if it was a movie, what does the camera need to see and when? And you to get the information that the reader needs at that time. So I generally don't do a whole lot. 4 has been the most that I've done in any book. The one I'm writing right now is first person. The one that I just finished is first person, and they are the only point of view characters. And for mystery, I think that's really effective because that kind of puts a little bit more suspense for the reader, just because they don't have all the information. One person can't have all of the information, and they're going to have other people share it. So for mystery, I think that really leads to a little suspense. And side characters, I like to make, I've got some in both of my first person stories that are mysteries. I've got some very strange, unusual, quirky, because I love strange, unusual, quirky side characters. But that's, by not letting them have a point of view, that kind of gets me there. They have to be extra expressive with their dialogue. And then I don't have to worry about somebody loving Edna more than Ronnie, and something, well, and you do, but it just happens. So yeah.
Okay, thanks y'all.
Anybody else? Checking to see if there's another question on the Facebook page. Let's see. Oh, and Dean was asking, do you have a jumbled mess? And then what it should look like. And I don't, I will say, when I read the older, like Agatha Christie's, which I love, but she head hops in the same paragraph so many times. And I get I'm like, wait, who thought that? Who said that? Who thought that? And so, so-and-so was mesmerized by her beauty, but she thought he was, it's like, stop, it's too much.
Well, and that seems to be sort of a, semi-recent development of sticking with one character's thoughts and point of view. Because I know I referenced Tom Clancy, or he would do that. And so the first time I started reading him, I also had to, adjust to that. Going for having, if there were 2 characters talking in a scene, he might, be in both persons' head at the same time. So that's almost, an omnipotent narrator, which, used to be the way, everything was written. And so I think that, a lot of it is, what do readers expect now? And so, if you're going to read Agatha Christie or Clancy or anybody from, from the past, you just have to know that it's going to read a little differently than if you go and get the, the newest book, off the shelf at Brewing Owl or whatever. But in order to, if your goal is to, sell a book, let's say you're not indie publishing, but you want to be traditionally published, you have to know that kind of stuff. You have to know what sort of genre conventions are current, especially if you want to have comparable titles, which you'll have to if you want to get agents and editors to buy your books. So it is important to know what readers expect now. And a lot of times, if you do go back and read older stuff, you'll find that they break all the rules that we keep talking about in teaching. Well, that's because, those are the rules now because we want to satisfy our readers now. And so back then, that is how all the books were written. So, books, in terms of format, a lot like the language we use, is fluid and keeps changing. So it's important to stay current.
Yes. Agreed.
In the classics, they all used a single point of view, and that was told through that one person's head. So, and they thought that was the best way back then. And they set the rules, but then we broke them. So,
That's funny. Do we have any other questions?
I do. So I'm assuming everybody has had that moment where you're sitting there looking at your sticky notes or your bulletin board and you finished this project. How do you decide what's next or which story is going to be worth investing in? How do you pick?
I can answer that really quickly. I go to my critique group and I give them the first chapter. Christine knows this because I give them the first chapter of the two projects that are the top two that I'm thinking of, and they tell me what they like better, and then that's what I go with. So that was real easy for me. Linda, how do you decide which the next book?
my publisher.
Yeah.
Yeah, my editor decides. Usually it's not a problem. And shoot, at this, as old as I'm getting, I welcome any ideas from outside source. So, but I send in proposals. Like a 3-book proposal at contract negotiation time. And so right now, I just sent a proposal for a 4-book series set during the building of the Transatlantic Railway. And the tent is going to be set in the tent towns. And so then I'll have my main characters, my 4 main characters, and each book is one of their stories. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. For traditionally published authors, it's the publisher and the machine that you have working for you kind of helps determine that. I have been working with 2 small presses. And, a lot of it is when is the deadline for which book. And, I unfortunately timed it to where I'm basically working on editing 2 books at once now. And they are, not in the same series. So it's a little more difficult than I thought it was going to be. So now I know that I would much rather, kind of go one series at a time, one book at a time if I can, because that's difficult. I would say that for me, the books that I've written are the ideas that I can't push out of my head, because writers have a million of those a day. This would be a great story, that'd be a great story, but it's the ones that your brain keeps coming back to and won't get rid of. Because sometimes that's the hardest thing is to decide what stories, an idea, can I make it a full story, even if it's just flash fiction all the way to a novel, or is it just something that, would be a great scene, but then there's not anything else to it. But yeah, like for me, it's the ones that nag in your thoughts and that you can't get rid of, kind of like a song that you can't stop singing. I would use that as the analogy. Those are the ones that your brain wants to write, whether or not you know it, I guess.
That's a good point. Brian, what about you?
Oh man, motivation is not my strong suit right now, but I would say that the smoothest transition I've had was where while I was when I had a book doing the rounds, when I was sending it out, I started another one, and I had kind of one writing while the other germinated, if that makes sense. Like I finished one, and then before editing it, I did a first draft of another, and then went back, and that was the best transition I've had, was going creative, and then edit, and kind of mix those together, and that helped me a lot. I wish I could go back and have done it that way this time, but I also have I have a very big file full of ideas, as I'm sure all of you have or are working on, or wish you had written them down. But I would highly suggest keeping that idea file. And the one, like Rick said, the ones that you just keep going back to, that you obsess over. I'm a bit of an obsessive, so the things you just can't stop thinking about. But save all of those ideas, and the ones that you'll go back through and you won't even remember having had that idea, and it'll jump right out for you. So I highly recommend just writing it all down.
I do too. Another thing that I remember just popped into my head, another friend of mine who writes, she said that when she's trying to decide between a couple of options, she'll look on the calendar and see, is there any kind of anniversary that's coming up that relates to one of the ideas that she's thought of. Like if there's it's the 150th anniversary of the Civil War. So if she's got anything Civil War, she starts writing that about a year in advance. So it's ready right there when all the hubbub is going on. So
that's a great idea.
It's something to think about anyway. I don't have any of those, but anybody else have anything on that question? Because I've got another question.
I just wanted to say that when I was writing, the second book of my Men of Legend series, I had introduced an famous outlaw, Clay Allison, and my editor fell in love with him and asked for his story. So then I had to change his name because I didn't want it to be an autobiography or anything.
Yeah.
But so that kind of, she just really, really liked him. And so it led into my outlaw series. So, and all of that. So, you never know. And I hadn't even planned on writing an outlaw series, but
It seems to have worked out for you.
Yeah, it did. And it was very popular. So
cool. Okay, I've got another question. It says, when you start a project or working on an idea, how do you approach it? Do you just sit down and write for a certain number of days, or do you start writing a certain number of pages a week, or give yourself arbitrary deadlines, or what do you need to do to get that first push in to where you're really committed to a story or project?
I am so bad about I heard arbitrary deadlines, and it set my hairs on end, because that's the problem a lot of times, especially when you're a self-publisher or you're just starting out. I'm actually a little jealous of well, I'd say I'm very jealous of Linda.
Oh.
No, writers are jealous. There's a whole chapter in Bird by Bird about overcoming jealousy. So I know, but no, just I'm a little jealous that you have people who expect something. And unfortunately for a lot of us, there's not anyone breathing down the back of our neck expecting a first draft or a second draft or anything else. And so you have to set your own deadlines and you have to set your own goals. For me, the most successful I've been with it is setting times each week, especially when I was in the early days of stay-at-home dad and I had young kids. I had to set specific times of the week, not even daily, but just specific times of the week that were my writing time. And as long as you're deliberate about it and you're adding to that word count, eventually you're going to get there. It's inevitable. I've always heard nightmares about people who spend decades on the same novel. And I had one I really, really loved. The name's escaping me right now, but the guy spent 20 years on it. And it took me a couple of years to read the thing. And I loved it. But it was definitely one of those things where I wish he had been able to write it in 4 years so that we could have enjoyed more output. But that's my take on it.
I hit for, or I aim for, sometimes I don't hit it, but I aim for 1,000 words a day. I'm really lucky that I don't have kids or a job or, all I have is writing, and so I have to fill my day somehow. So that it works out, I guess, but 1,000 words a day is what I aim for. And if I get it, fine. If I don't, I don't obsess over it. Whatever I get, I count myself lucky.
That's good. What about you, Rick? What do you shoot for?
I don't keep track as much as I probably should. And of course, I've, just completed my 4th manuscript, or at least, going through final revisions on it. And I'm just now figuring out what routine works for me. And so, figuring that out is step one, and it's not the same for everybody. I know a lot of people, get the words down, get a whole draft, and then go back and revise. Well, I figured out that, my mind doesn't allow me to do that. If I think of something the night before that I change, if I don't go back and change it, then that keeps me from having more output. So I have to go back and do some revision, and then, take off from where I was before. So depending on how much revision I have to do, that affects how many words I put out. But usually I'm going back and adding stuff in. I have to go back in and layer in details. So usually I'm adding words anyway, even if it is on something, that I wrote the previous day. And I know the question mentioned motivation and all that stuff. I definitely am one of those who I can, come up with a great first or second chapter, love it, love the story, love the character, and then, do I finish that or not? Like before I ended up finishing my debut novel, I must have done that 5 or 6 times, come up with some great pages. Everybody I showed them to loved the pages, but I didn't have enough story. And so that, and that becomes part of the problem, I think, for a lot of people. I know we've all read novels that, you talk about the saggy middle, where the middle is just full of stuff and it feels like it goes real slow. Sometimes that's because, if you are traditionally published, you almost have to hit certain page and word counts, both because the reader expects a novel to be that big, because you're putting out a physical product. So let's say your book's coming out in hardcover. You can't have a hardcover that's like 200 pages because it looks and feels strange. 300 to 400 pages is about the sweet spot for the book to physically feel right. So you have to hit that. And so if you don't have a story, then to get there, you're just adding in a whole lot of fluff. And rather than cutting out a bunch of words, you kind of have to leave all those words in to, hit the goal. So I would say, in terms of motivation, what I have done and what has worked for me is, if you come up with a great, first chapter, great beginning, go ahead and write it down, but then come up with a synopsis and figure out, what the whole story is. And if you only have enough story for a novella, maybe that's what you write. And even traditionally published authors can indie publish those, if they're in the same series, as a marketing tool, as a as a reader magnet type of a thing. But I would say if you don't know what your story is, then it's hard to know whether or not you can stick with that story all the way to the end. Because for those of us who write novels, it is a marathon. It takes a long time to write one of those things. And so if you're not committed, if you don't know that it's a story that you want to write and that you almost have to write, Ryan mentioned being obsessive. You almost have to be that way if you're going to finish a novel. You have to be obsessed with getting through to the end, and sometimes it's figuring out the end. I'm not saying you have to know the end, but you have to have enough story to get you to an end. And you have to almost be obsessed with getting there, because if you're not, then you're going to get to the middle, and you're going to abandon the project. We've all done it, at least in the early stages of our writing career. So that's what I would say is your motivation has to be, if I don't get this story down, and if I don't figure out how this story ends, some part of me won't be fulfilled.
Yeah. Well, and I have also, I think those are really, those are really good points, because you've got, motivation, figuring out what works for you and all of that. And one thing, Linda was saying 1,000 words a day. I've done NaNoWriMo several years in a row. And if you don't know what that is, that's National Novel Writing Month, which is the month of November. And the goal is to write 50,000 words in 30 days. And so to do that, you have to hit every single day, you have to hit a word count of 1,667 words a day. And so whenever I'm writing a chapter or whatever, I look at that word count down there in the bottom of the screen, and I'm like, okay, what is that? Okay, so would this get me, if I did this every day, which I don't, because business is crazy. I've got a day job that's ridiculous, but I don't get it every day. But when I sit down to write, I don't want to get up from writing until I've hit that 1667 or higher, because to me, that's where you feel, for me, about 1,200 words is when I'm getting that little electric feeling that you get, that you're like, okay. And then, and you want to get to, okay, when you hit that 1,200, okay, now I've got to, what does the last line of this chapter look like? That is the cliffhanger. So now I go from 1,200 words to, 16, 18, 2,000. And what is that last? I just was in a book the other day, and the last sentence of chapter 1 was, and that's when the screaming started. And I was like, yes, that's a great last line.
Yeah.
So you want to, but I hit that point about 1,200 words. I hit that, and I'm like, okay, now I know where at that point, I know where the last line of the chapter is going to be. So that's what I like, having that, having the experience of NaNoWriMo, where what 1667 feels like, that kind of, when you've done that a few years in a row, whether it's a novel or a memoir or whatever you're writing, having that as a goal, doing 50,000 words in 30 days is a big accomplishment, and being able to, hit
Absolutely.
that. It's fun. And then you get that feeling, you get that experience. It's almost like muscle memory. Like for me, at 1,200 words, I'm like,
a little farther. A couple of tricks I've heard is continuing into the next chapter rather than stopping at the end of one. I've used that in the past. With 4-Color Bleed, it really helped me to share my progress on Twitter. There was a very small group of people who would like or respond if I would say, hey, I managed 2,500 words today, or it was a slow day, I only got 800 words, but I'm really happy with them. Just kind of putting that out there in the universe, or if you have a critique group or a writing group that you're working with, they're going to be very encouraging as well. So just something like that. I have a toy I wanted to share with you guys that I haven't gotten to show off. I got one of these things. Have any of
Oh,
y'all
yeah.
played with one of these?
Oh.
Yeah. I customized my Alpha Smart. It's just a dedicated writing tool, distraction-free writing. There's a lot of different options out there. You can just get a little keyboard that works with your cell phone, but where you don't have your cell phone in your hand, if that makes sense. Just finding a way to, I am so easily distracted by everything. And that's part of what makes my writing what it is it's all over the place. And I like that about it. But I have to remind myself that just because I need the name of a great song from 1958 doesn't mean I need to research 1958 right then. I can just put in a placeholder and come back to it later. I see Christine laughing because I bet you know exactly what I mean, where you're obsessing like, oh, what's the perfect song?
Oh, just
You
call
waste
me
your whole morning.
Alice and show me a rabbit hole.
And,
Yeah,
and see,
exactly.
I can't do that, Ryan. It's I've tried that, and if I leave X's or anything like that,
Oh, exactly.
it doesn't work. Now, one thing I will say is that my years in journalism did teach me to do very quick, very precise spot research when I have to on something. So
Yeah.
that is definitely a skill that you may or may not have. But yeah, like if I have to know what that song is going to be or whatever it is, I have to spend that half an hour or whatever it is figuring that out before my mind will allow me to move forward. Because I've tried it both ways, and believe it or not, for me, it is
Right.
faster for me to go to do that research or to go back and backfill as I
You-
write
You
than it
say
is for me to.
I'm sorry. You say you spend a half hour doing it. Do you set that time for yourself? Because I know for me, the problem.
I pull that number out of a dark
Right.
place. You know what I
A
mean?
dark place.
But
No,
no,
I get it.
It's one of those like I wrote a thriller that had spy or actually intelligence officers and retired military special forces in it. And I've never served. I was never an intelligence officer, but I know people who were. So and I watch that stuff so you can get the feeling. But yeah, to know the specifics of what battalion or squadron would this person have served in
Right.
to do this purpose, and what are the tier 1 special forces, like all that stuff. A lot of people, if they know they're going to do that research ahead of time and maybe spend 4
Front
months
load
to
it.
have a bit thick file to where they can go back to it. But just the way it works for me is to do it right then. So maybe it's 2 hours or whatever it is to get the
Right.
answer. But usually, I end up doing enough research that it comes out later anyway. So I don't feel
Yes.
like it is time wasted. But I don't recommend that for you unless you figure it out that is how you work best. Because unfortunately, I was talking with an aspiring writer the other day, and telling them about they're asking about word count, trying to hit like toward the end of a novel, and I said, hey, you just have to write the story down and figure out where you are, and then if you have to cut a lot, if you know that you have to go back in and add more, that's what you have to do. But I said you almost have to write 3 or 4 manuscripts to figure out how you work best. And she was like, oh, that sounds so ineffective and terrible and all that stuff. And it's like, well, that's the writing process. That's why we write, that's why we don't become CPAs, because it's not all math. It's not science. It's definitely figuring it out, and it just takes a long time.
I would say the most important thing is that you found out what works for you to be productive.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
figuring out that process is extremely important. And I think I've said before, I guess that might have been in a different situation, where one of the reasons the pandemic has slammed me so hard with my productivity is it turns out I never thought of myself as a writer with a process, but it turns out that I am. And when that process is completely disrupted, it really does throw you off, and you have to figure out what that process looks like now. And hopefully I can just return to the old one before I have to give up completely. But yeah, just finding out how you can be productive and make that word count go up, whatever it is. If it works, it works. Keep it going.
Agreed.
I have a comment, and many of you all have already heard this reveal from Morgan Heisinger, aka Bethany Claire, who said that, and I talked to her about this afterwards, that when she's writing, she's up every day at 5 o'clock, and before she does anything else, she at her keyboard, and 5,000 words. And when my jaw dropped, she hastened to add, well, they're not all good words, but this was the pace this is how she paced herself to get a new work out every 3 months. And apparently after 17 books self-published, she redefined self-publishing. She burned out. And so I don't know how she's picked back up. Okay, everyone hear me? My internet connection.
We can hear you, Rick.
I'm reminded of Louis L'Amour, apropos of what Ryan was talking about, that he, as soon the PCs, and he was just on a typewriter, he'd finished the last page of a work, set it aside, put a paper in, and start the new one, and just never let up, and ultimately would have a house in a rather large home in Beverly Hills. And so that worked for him. We were talking about various forms of motivation. I think all of us, though, have to recognize the productive aspect of guilt too. That how we know what we should be doing, and we know we have it within us to figure this out. And anyway, at some point, at least in my experience, that burden becomes so great that there's no grace for it but to get at the keyboard. I would ask Kim. I've been amazed in the time that I have known you, how you wear so many hats. Your day job is particularly demanding. It would seem like there are probably easier lines of work than building houses in a pandemic. But I know you're very active in your church, and you have your family. How do you find time to write and be so productive?
I have, sometimes I'm not very productive, but I do have, I have a pistol. And no, that's not really true. I mean, I do have a pistol, but what I do if I've got my sound my sound canceling headphones that don't put anything in, they just cancel everything out for when I'm shooting with my pistol. But if I put those on, nobody talks to me, and they know if I'm wearing my headphones, don't talk to me, and I don't listen to anything. I don't listen to music. I don't do anything but focus on the writing. So when I'm writing, that's generally what I do. And when my kids are both grown and moved out, but when when it got down to it, occasionally we would have National Get Out of My House Day, and my husband would take the boys and they would go, and he would text me and say, "Is it safe yet?" And I'd say, "Not yet." Then they would stay, and they would just stay out of the house until it was time to come back. And I do have to say, I couldn't do this, but I have the most supportive spouse in the world. He lets me sit over dinner and talk through a couple of different, the most effective ways to kill people. And he lets me talk about, okay, so if you are going to bury someone, this is the way to not get caught if you're burying them in your backyard. And he makes allowances when I eavesdrop on other tables' conversations, and that's he just takes care of me that way. And And he somehow or another keeps up when I do start talking in the middle of a conversation. When I start a conversation in the middle, he just is there to listen. And if I didn't have that, there's no possible way that I could do this. And so I would just say, if you're just starting out, if you don't have a supportive spouse, you may have to murder them. And I'll tell you. No, I don't have any experience with murdering anybody that y'all know.
Neither do I, just to throw that out there.
Right.
Yeah, that
just-
sounds like
Yeah.
something a murderer would definitely say.
Right.
Just so you know.
Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, you go to conferences and you take, you learn what other people do. And this last month, I've been busier in my whole day job life than I've ever been, which is absolutely ridiculous. And I write because if I don't, my critique group is gonna say, hey, you don't have anything. So I'm a pleaser, so I want to please them and I'll get it done for them. So that's all I can say. And I have found a question that I saw earlier, and this kind of leads into it. The most productive time of the day for me is not first thing in the morning or last thing before I go to bed. Well, I'm like at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, which is the weirdest. I don't know anybody else who does this, but 4 o'clock in the afternoon, my brain kicks into productivity mode and I can go. And I think it's, how, is it Thomas Edison that used to do he would think of ideas as he was dozing off and write them down. I think that's kind of where I am at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm so exhausted that my brain starts generating crazy hallucinations, and that sort of has worked out for me.
Well, you don't have to be crazy to be a writer, but it helps.
It helps. Yes, it does. It does.
Thank you.
Sure. Does anybody else have any questions? I had another question about what tools, if there are tools or resources that people use for plotting and for character development.
I would say for character development, and I keep track, I use what I call supplemental files, and I know some of you are absolutely tired of hearing about it, but I keep them to the side, and it's very helpful for, especially if you have a lot of characters, which is not something we usually recommend, but if you have a ton of characters, you have to keep track of them somehow. So I just have a little side file. It's just a Word document that I use. I use Google Docs for that because it doesn't have to be formatted any specific way, and you can access it from any device that you're signed in on. So I keep track of it that way, and that's also how I know Rick makes changes as he goes, but if I do that, I would still have my first unfinished novel, which is what happened with that one. So I keep track of all those files, the changes I want to make, and then I make them all at the end, so I only have to do it once. With plotting, I am more of a seat of the pants type of guy, as you can probably imagine by my disheveled hobo-like appearance. But the trick for me is if I do know I only have a small amount of time to write, which is usually often the case with most of us, especially when we have jobs or families that we're also in charge of, I do sometimes plot out as much as I'm going to need to get through, just so I don't have to think what comes next. I already have it in hand. And you can do that before you sit down for your writing session. You can do that waiting in the car, things like that. So sometimes a little bit of plotting, we won't throw you out of the seat of your pants society for that. I promise.
Yes.
So I've got 2 craft books that kind of work, either way, whether or not you're seat of the pants writer or a plotter. And really, I'm somewhere in the middle, and it depends on what genre I'm writing in. Like if I'm going to write a straight up mystery, then yeah, I probably should know, pretty much how it's going to go. Action thriller, you almost have to leave yourself open to having something crazy happen in the next scene, because that's the way you get through and keep the action going. But one of them, if you're a plotter, if you like to know where you're going, if you like to have index cards with, you know, your plot points and your beats and stuff like that. Save the Cat novel is something that that I found really useful. And it doesn't give you a formula necessarily, but it shows you at what point in your story things probably should happen. You know, when the twist should come, when you're done setting up your story, when your inciting incident maybe should happen. And of course, you know, you can feel free to break all the rules you want, but knowing that structure allows you to either follow it or not. And it cites examples of you know, very popular fiction and shows how it worked in those examples to help you get a feel for it. And I think that a lot of people who prefer to plot their books use that as a resource. Again, that was Save the Cat Writes a Novel, and you'll know it's the right book because it has a cat hanging on, you know, like that. So that's one book. And if you are a Seat of the Pants writer, let me look it up. I just got done reading this one. And it's by Stephen James, who is a, you know, a well-known thriller writer. Let's see, what is it called? It's called Story Trumps Structure, and it was written well before any of the presidential administrations. But it's called Story Trumps Structure, which is exactly what it sounds like. That you know, rather than having the structure of the Save Your Cat Writes a Novel, it's about how to write more organically, what we would call Seat of the Pants. And those two aren't necessarily mutually exclusive because, like I said, I use elements of both. But, you know, I think depending on which way you want to go, using those books on craft helps. In terms of technology, I just use Word for everything. But a lot of people, you know, there's Scrivener. I've heard good things about it. Never opened it, never used it. But I think if you figure out which way you prefer to write, then you can probably even just Google which tools work for which type of writer you are.
Linda, how about you?
I don't have any self-help books. Well, but in the past I have, you know, read them all basically. And isn't there a book that says there are only 20 basic plots, or maybe it's less than that? I can't remember.
Oh,
but
yeah.
anyway, there's only that many original plots. So, and then you twist and turn and add and
Yeah, it's just a
mix
follow.
two together and all that kind of stuff. But the main self-help book, then this doesn't even apply to what we're talking about, but the one I have used most is Word Painting. It's a book called Word Painting, and it teaches you how to make your words visual and put your reader into the story. I think her last name is McClanahan or something like that.
Okay.
But that's the only. I don't know. I just do it all just sitting down and doing it. I don't go to any books, or I'm terrible. I'm not a very good panelist. I'm sorry.
You're wonderful, Linda. You're doing great.
Writing is a craft that you can only learn by doing.
Yeah.
You can't learn it any other way. You have to do it.
Yeah.
Sit down and do it. So
I think that's a really good point. And I think I'm kind of a hybrid between a plotter and a pantser. I like to throw, you know, again, being a boy mom, occasionally I just need to blow something up. And, you know, whether that's metaphorically or literally in a story, that sometimes just happens. And so Because in my life with my children, I felt like, at the least, the least planned for moment, something would explode, whether metaphorically or literally. And so I think that's something that you've got to be. For me, I want to know where I'm going. I want to have that roadmap, but I want to be able to say, okay, what would throw the reader for a really good loop? What would be the last thing they expect? And my like tools that I use, I started that. If you can tell from this is screenplay by Sid Field, and it is torn and tattered and looks like it's been through a mom that has 2 boys, and it has. But I've kind of adapted his thing, and Sid Field actually has a new version of this now that's really, I'm kind of excited. I've got it digitally, so I can't show you what that is. But just having that screenplay is really wonderful, because then you see it, and it's that's probably my most commented, the thing that people comment to me most about my stories is that they're like, it's like a movie. I can sit here and watch it. But I have kind of hybrid what he has into my, I've got a poster that I make and plot stuff out on. And I've got my, this is the thing that starts it all. This is, that's the end of Act 1. Act 2, the end of Act 2 is the point of no return, and things like that. And that's just a good reminder to myself, so that I can go, okay, so at this point, but in the middle, as Christine knows, she helped me she helped me a great deal working out the story that I'm working on right now, because I knew where I wanted to end it. But I was stupid, and I picked like the worst date to start the story in history, because it's a historical. It starts on the first day is May 1st, 1945 in Amsterdam, which anybody who knows what happened April 30th of 1945, and I'm in Amsterdam, which is, I had done some research, and I thought, oh, that'll be a wonderful place. Well, that first week of May in Amsterdam was crazy. And so, I would like to just start it there and make everything basically impossible. And I knew where I was going at the end. I knew, who was going to live and who was going to die. But having that roadmap in front of me, that helps. And I think I still have it on my website. If anybody that wants a plot map that's blank, and I just laminated mine so that I could write on it with the vis-a-vis markers and do that. But I think it's on my website and free stuff.
Great.
Just message me if you want one. But it's fun, because that way I can kind of see most of the time. Well, when I showed it to Christine the other day, when I showed it to Christine and Donna in my critique group, my whole third act was a big old blank. And my pinch point was, X person dies. And, they both said, well, and Christine said, I think you killed off your villain, right? Way too early. Or my first body happened way too early. And then we just kind of had fun with it. And it was, it was great. So I would just like to recommend, even if you, it's definitely not filled out to where it's got like all the details in here, but it's definitely a nice roadmap, so that I know that as I go, okay, in order to have this happen, oh, we're going to have a train that, runs off the rails or whatever,
Kim also has great resources for planning your characters that she has put out there.
Oh, yeah, I've got a character workbook. If you need the link to that, I've got a character workbook, and it's basically, don't tell anybody, this is just a secret just between all of us. But it's basically a Dungeons and Dragons setup to where what each character is. My boys are D&D players, and so they kind of help me get that together. I like the, what are these? The emotion thesaurus. If y'all don't have these,
Yes.
there's a whole set of them, not just.
That's really good.
These
That's
are really, really
excellent.
good.
I do have that one.
Yeah, they're really, really
And I,
good. The Donna gave me this book, and it helped me with my historical Western horror. And it is, let me see if I can put it up there. What is that? The Dictionary of Strange, Curious, and Lovely.
ooh,
And
I need that.
yes, oh, it's really, really good. I wish it was organized a slightly different way, but it was so much fun to read. And my narrator for my horror book novel, it is Mark Twain. And so he uses, you know, if there's any time that you can use a $5 word, he uses a $250 word. So that really helped me in that. So it was kind of fun. But those are kind of my resources. And the Texas High Plains Writers is a wonderful
you go.
resource. I get to connect with everybody that's got so many great ideas.
One thing I would mention, I was trying to remember the name of a really great book on plotting, and it's not coming to me, and I'm almost glad, because it absolutely derailed me when I was writing one of my books, because it had so many great ideas that I felt I had to implement right then, and it totally threw me off my game. And so when it comes to things like that, unless there's a specific problem you're trying to solve in the book that you're working on, I would wait to read that next great book on writing in between projects.
Yeah,
I've got a lot of great ones on my shelf that I'm going to get to, but if you do it in the middle, it might mess up your groove, and that's not the purpose, and that's not what the author would want. So hold off on it. Maybe it can help you with the editing instead.
And those books make you feel like you're not good enough, that's the way they make me feel. I'm not good enough. I haven't learned enough yet to be a writer because I don't know all of this stuff. So yeah, I that's one reason I don't read them myself. But to redeem myself, I do make lists, lots of lists. I have a list of names. I have a big list of, well, I keep a list of the characters plus a little bit about each one, because when I go back during editing, I say, what did they look like? I don't remember. So anyway, I put.
Oh, I see. Wayne's got his.
I put what they. Oh, okay. Oh, mine's not near. No, mine's just it's just plain. It's just plain in a Word file. So yeah, but that's great, Wayne.
I'll throw in two more things that I've got. One is I have found that online thesauruses are not as helpful to me as real thesauruses. So I hit a couple of thrift stores at one point and got me a stack of different thesauruses. And one is very old, and I find gold in there all the time. I actually use them a lot for my day job. I write commercially, and finding the right word is very helpful. And for some reason, you can spend all day at thesaurus.com or dictionary.com, and it just, they don't work as well as some of the way those old books organize their words. And also for character names, I try to keep lists of character names as well. I also have a couple of thrift store baby book names.
Yes.
And those are extremely helpful because they also will have the names that aren't popular right now, which is often what you're wanting, is something you just want to remember not to name your romantic lead after your aunt, because that then someone's going to have to remind you, hey, don't you have a great grandmother named that? Isn't that weird? So
Yes.
that's just my advice. Baby books and thesauruses are some of the cheapest tools you can put on your shelf.
Yes, I agree.
I would like to mention I would like to mention that some books that I think are really wonderful for helping with structure that have not made me feel inadequate are the K.M. Wieland books. She has character books, structure books. She even has workbooks that you can use. And I feel like it's really good information without making you feel like I don't know anything. So
Yeah, I was gonna say that, and that is very common. I'll start reading something, and they talk about, oh, you can write the 5-day novelist or whatever, and I've read that too, and it's like, that's only if you live on Mars or the moon. You know, you can do that, but it's ridiculous. There's a lot of them out there that I think the purpose of them are to make you feel like you're inadequate, like they are writing
I
from
do too.
some point, you know, to look down on, you know, whoever might be reading, and you can come up to be whatever. And I don't find those helpful at all. I'm like Linda. I don't find that helpful. I find that discouraging, and then it just makes it, you know, you just don't get as much out of it. It makes me less productive. So one thing I do, you know, Linda had talked about, I've got my my character notebook, and Linda had talked about she's got her list. I use Pinterest for that. I will make boards for each of my books, and all of my storylines and my storyline, you know, story ideas to come are out there, and I will cast my book, and that way I can look up and go, hey, did he have green eyes? Did he have hazel eyes? Did he have brown eyes? You know, and I can go back and look at that, and for me, it's just real easy. Also, when I cast a character with an actor, whether they're, I mean, I've got some of my characters are cast as Gregory Peck. Well, you know, he's not around today, but I can look at him and go, okay, if we're in this situation, what is he going to say? If I can't think of what the dialogue should be, I can say, okay, well, what would Cary Grant say? Or what would, you know, Joseph Cotton say in this? You know, he's going to murmur, and he's going to have his cigar sitting out here, and it's going to be this. And, you know, that really helps me. It has also, by having all of my books on Pinterest and cast the way that I've got them, I have also got like 8,000 people following me on Pinterest, which is,
That's a lot of people.
that's a lot of people. And, you know, and I've had messages from people saying, hey, you know, are you going to have more in this series? Are you going to, you know, when is this book coming out? This looks really interesting. And so
That's a great idea.
it's very helpful. It's also very helpful, just like in my Little Black Dress series, I have all the guns. Each of the characters carries a different handgun, and I keep it straight. You know, okay, Hedge carries a Walther. Evan carries a Springfield. So that way I can look it up and go, oh, that's a 10+1, or, you know, and I know how many shots they have, and I know how,
That's a good thing.
So it's got the whole internet, but only what I need. So I stay focused. When I'm looking up something, I just focus just on that board, and I don't go, oh, and then what are we going to this looks like a good recipe. We're having that for dinner. You know, not any of that.
If you have trouble focusing when you're using Pinterest for that, I've also had a lot of luck with mind maps.
Oh yeah.
Where you draw a circle and you write what the topic, and then you draw a line, and then that branches off. If you Google mind map it, you'll see what it is. And I find those extremely helpful sometimes in plotting, especially I have a knack for getting my characters into situations that I forgot to give myself an out. And that's very helpful for that. And I've also, this is a weird one, but you can buy these things called Rubik's Story Cubes, and they're little dice. I'd have to run and grab them if you wanted to see, but they're little dice that have pictures on them, and they have tons of sets, but I have 4 or 5 of them. And one time I got my character stuck in something, and I shook those dice up. I guess I was playing with Kim's character sheets. I shook the dice up and I dropped them, and one of the dice told me where my characters needed to go next. And it was perfect. And it only worked because those ideas are mingling around. And so it's a very abstract way to do it. But if you could try that. Philip K. Dick used the I Ching for writing Man in the High Castle. So anything that you can find that just kind of opens your brain up can be very helpful. If you want to use some divination, there's you a way to play around with it.
I have those
Oh,
dice
I
too.
want to,
They're fun.
in reference to Kim's character book, it has been wonderful, and this is what it looks like. See that?
There you go.
I was gonna say
But,
she uses it very.
and
Does
you
it
can
come
tell
with the
it's well
sticky notes?
used.
Yeah. and I think I've got it on Amazon. It's only like $5.99 or something like that. It's cheap. You fill it up, but it's also really, really wonderful when you have a series and you're writing 18 months later the same guy, and you're going, oh, now I can't remember anything about him. It's crazy. And that was one of the things when I did. Those 3 books are also on Audible. And when I was working with my narrator, it was nice to be able to send her the link to my Pinterest boards with my casts in them too, so that she could say, okay, so and she messaged me back. She said, hey, you've got this one guy and he's British. Do you want him to be British? I said, I don't care. I was like, I said, let me check and make sure he's not supposed to be British at the end in the 3rd book. But, I was like, I don't care. So she did a great job. Anyway, I have found the character workbooks. I've found that the Pinterest boards, all of those things are very helpful, especially when you're doing something over a long term. And I know that if I want to go back to write a 4th or 5th book in my Little Black Dress series, I can do that. And it's, all my characters will be right there. So anyway, do we have any others? Any other questions? It's 11:30, so we're gonna, we've got time for about 2 more questions, if there's anything. I'm gonna go back to my gallery view.
Kim, I think all of you really have talked about having critique groups that have helped you a lot. How do you choose the people in your critique group so that they will help you move your book forward? What has been your choosing process to really find people who will help you?
Well, the first time our critique group met was in 2017. Is that right, Donna? 2017.
Yes.
And it was a God thing. We kind of all came together. Usually when a critique group forms, it's people that write very similar genres or complementary, and ours is not. Everybody writes something a little bit different, but in our experience, it's been really wonderful because when we write something different, Brandy always asks when she's with us, she's like, well, how does that make that person feel? She writes, very different from us. And so she's like, well, how does that make you feel? When Donna is reading my stuff, she's like, okay, well, I want to see this. She writes sci-fi fantasy. So she's very much wants to see the world. She's very into the world building. And Christine now, she's got a lot of, oh, she's so good. and she's picking up, and she replaced Susie. And Susie was one, I will tell you, Susie would go in and she would just say, you don't need these words, cut them. She would just, she was our red pencil teacher, and she would just cut words out. And then she didn't pull any punches. Well, this is ridiculous. Why do you have to have that? But we all compliment each other. She also likes to kill people. So we would have to stop her. She would say, I think I'm going to kill so-and-so. We'd be like, no, you got to keep that person just for a little bit longer. If you're going to kill them, wait 3 chapters. But, and I think we all really are, I'm big on pacing. I want to see everybody's story moving along. So I think you can't be afraid to mix genres, but also you have to the main focus is when you're building a critique group is you have to have people that you can trust to tell you the truth. And you have to get to a certain point in your own mind, body, soul, heart, everything that allows others to tell you the truth, where you are very willing to accept that and accept that what they're telling you is not, you know, they may say, you got to cut that scene and it's the scene you love. But you've got to be willing to ask them why they don't love it like you do and accept what they give you. And it's still ultimately your story. So you write it the way you want it. And you have to be willing to, you know, accept that the person that you just told that was the dumbest thing that they, and we don't ever say dumb. We don't say dumb or stupid in our group, but I think it's a lot of that trust has to go both ways. You have to be able to say, you know, to trust that they're trying to make your story better. And you have to trust them, you know, that they're going to read it, that they're going to not purposefully say, you know, that was the dumbest thing. And just be honest. Honesty is the very biggest thing in a critique group. And so, you know, and it takes a little bit of feeling out.
I would pitch in on that. I think the question is a lot. As adults, we know how hard it is to make new friends. It's tough, and a critique group is really it can also be a very practical thing and a business thing. But if you don't like each other, it's going to be less likely to occur organically. I could say that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so a big first step is joining groups like THPW, where you meet other writers and doing like that. And I know I'm sort of a stranger because I'm a little bit more extroverted than some writers, but I also have major introvert tendencies. And a lot of times I think if I'm not invited, that I'm not wanted. And that's almost never the case. Well, with me, it's sometimes the case. But I would say that you don't be afraid to ask. If someone says if they can't add you to their critique group, it's usually just a practical thing, because once you have more than 4 or 5 people and every group is different, there's just not time to get to everyone in a normal amount of time. Mm-hmm. So what I would say is, if you know some people who you like their writing, say, hey, are you in a critique group? And who knows, you might create something really special without even knowing that that's the catalyst to it, because some people are just waiting. Most of us here just are waiting to be asked, or we're in a group and we just aren't able to add anyone right now. So
yeah,
don't think that you're being, it's just one of those things where I think sometimes we feel excluded because we're not invited to the party, but in reality, it's not an exclusive thing. Maybe you assume someone else is already in a group. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
And our group started when THPW, at the end of a meeting, we made an announcement that anybody who wanted to be in a critique group, and we kind of, I think that one afternoon, you know, had talked about doing 2 or 3, and then like I couldn't make it at that time, and I think Donna, as you know, said, hey, we're going to throw this out here. We're going to meet at Palace Coffee at 10 a.m. or something like that one day. And the 4 of us showed up, and then just kind of, it just worked, and nobody else ever asked at the time. And then it just kind of gelled. And I feel like all of us, you know, we felt very like we trusted everybody, and we had tried to help out with a couple of other critique sessions early on, and it really didn't work out. The 4 of us kind of sat and went, this is not the same vibe. You know, we knew immediately that it was not the same vibe that the 4 of us had. So we've kind of got it closed. But honestly, in our situation, we have 4 people in our group, and not all 4 of us can be there every time. But we still, we kind of allow an hour per person, which is probably more time than most people would do in a critique group, but we take the time to do that. And that lets us get details, I mean, really down to the nitty gritty in our group. And if we had another person, we would have to take a weekend every single So I really think, you know, it kind of depends on how much feedback you want too. Are you going to be in a group where everybody reads and then you get 5 minutes of feedback? Or are you going to be in a group where everybody reads and you get a full head on, okay, line by line, this is what needs to happen here. And this is why I don't understand this. It just kind of depends on your commitment level too, as far as, you know, how much you're going to put out there and how much you're going to let people pick at you.
So a little bit is just finding people you jive with and asking them, are you in a critique group? Do you want to be in a critique group? Okay.
And that's the key. I think that's a lot of it. And I think there's no better place to find those people than THPW.
I think it's also very important that, you know, because Kim was talking about mindset, that, you know, you've got people that you can work with and trust and who will be honest with you without being harsh. There's no reason to attack. And if you're in a group and it's not working for you, leave. There are other people out there.
Yes. It's to comment on that. That's like reading a book that makes you feel stupid and incompetent. If you get that where, you know, people are just like, well, we don't know. And I'm Donna, do not, I love you, you know, but if you're in a group and they say, take that car chase out, that's no reason to have that car chase. You know,
True story.
It's a true story, but and I'm so glad she didn't leave when we said that to her. I'm so glad because she has just been invaluable. But I mean, you know, it's one of those things that if you're in a group, I hope the way we said it was not, you know, obviously we didn't go, oh, but there's a way to say it. And there's also, we could have easily said, well, that's the dumbest thing I don't understand. And she would have been gone, you know. So I really think the way you say it has so much to do with it.
My critique group is very fluid. We're always changing. When I first started with Jody and Phyllis Miranda and Dewana Pace, we all critiqued for several years, and then of course Dewana died, and so we keep changing, we keep adding people. Right now we have 5 and we're very eclectic. We have 2 romance writers, a thriller writer, that's Taylor Moore, and we just added Rick Treon, and then we have a fantasy writer, Bruce Edwards. So I don't know, we all just, so it doesn't really matter so much that you all write the same things. It's that you just click together, that you respect each other, and that you're always helpful.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
And Summer, I'm the webmaster for the Lubbock Right Critique Group. And we meet every Tuesday at 6:30 on Skype. And I just put our website in the chat there. And you can go in and join with the virtual meetings. And then if you like what we're doing, because we have a couple that do a lot of light editing, so it does take a while for them to do that, but everybody's really good on what we do there.
Cool.
So if you'd like to, anybody is welcome, not just 7.
No, just me.
Yeah, everybody is welcome. Yeah, but just go in there and click on meetings and then sign up for it, and you'll get an auto reply, and it'll tell you how to get in there. And we do meet on Skype every Tuesday at 6:30. So
That's great.
yeah, so everybody's welcome for that. So, and we've got a lady that's in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and that's writing a weird story.
Weird ones are great.
A very good story.
Stories are best stories.
the main character is, I haven't figured out if he's a descendant or if he's actually reincarnated from somebody way back in the olden days.
She'll probably reveal that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So it's fun. So y'all are all welcome to join us on Tuesday at 6:30
And y'all meet every week.
every week.
Okay.
Yeah. And what we do is there's a link in there on Google Drive where we upload our submission, and then everybody goes in and downloads it, critiques it, and then puts it in the person's thing. So we do that the week before, and then on that day we go back and we talk about it and show everything.
See, and that's a really great way to motivate so that you've got so much to write you write so much every week by
Right.
having that. That's really a great option.
Yeah, we have our 10-page limit, double spaced
Mhm.
for that, and use Word or Google Docs, either one.
Cool.
And then we use track changes, which is available in Google Docs to do the actual critique. And then the person can go in and download it, and they make up their mind whether they want to accept it or reject it. Yeah. So it's really good.
All right. Do we have any other questions? We're getting close to we're 11:45 now. So is there anybody else that's got any questions that you just I had a few that had messaged me, but I think we've covered everything on that. Anybody else? Don't be afraid. Don't be shy. Well, all right, then I want to say thank you to Linda and to Ricky and to Ryan. And I want to thank everybody who came today. And if you've got any other questions that you think of, don't be afraid to put them on the Facebook page, and we'll answer as we can. And just if it's for somebody specific, tag them. I have on my website, I have links for the character notebook somewhere. And if you don't find the link to my plotting poster, if you want a copy of that, just private message me and I'll get that to you, or I'll put the link. And anything else? Is there anybody else? Ryan, you've got your books on your website, ryanmcswain.com.
That's right.
And Ricky, you're on ricktreon.com.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And Linda is lindabrody.com.
Brody.com. Yes.
And I will tell you, mine is don't go to kimblack.com because there's a very beautiful young gospel singer. That's not me.
Oh.
So
Don't be so modest.
I know. So mine is, and I'm sure she's lovely and has wonderful, but you won't find my books there. But if you go to Kim Black Inc. and it's INK, kimblackink.com, that's where I am. And I think you can, if you go kimblack.net or kimblackbooks.com, those also roll over to my website. So, well, thank you all for being here. Does anybody else have any last parting words?
Thank you for having me. I'm not kicked out of the group.
Never, Linda.
Thanks for moderating, Kim.
Oh,
Thank you.
sure.
Yes.
It's kind of weird, but I haven't done that before. So now I got to put that on my resume.
There you go.
Do you have, Rick, do you have any other comments to make?
No, just that I'm glad everyone was able to come. Hopefully our answers were helpful. I know that I tend to talk way too much. In fact, a lot of my friends have gotten used to just telling me to be quiet whenever I just keep rambling. So, so I appreciate y'all putting up with that.
Thank you all. It was great.
Do we have any time when a projection of when we'll meet in person?
I imagine we will talk about that in today's board meeting this afternoon. We had decided we were going to not meet until the city of Amarillo went to code yellow, which it did this week. So I'm sure
Oh,
we'll
good.
be discussing that at today's board meeting. We've got actually a lot of things to discuss at today's board meeting, including, Dean, we're going to talk about the new anthology. We've got the 2021 came out, and it's on our website. It's available on our website, but we will talk about the new, we'll talk about themes and rules and all the fun stuff for the new one, hopefully this afternoon, and we'll get that information out to everybody. Also, I wanted to let everybody know the membership, the members only section that was kind of fouled up should be all fixed. If anybody wants to go in and log in with your stuff, if it doesn't work, please message me. If you've got new books, let me, let me know, and we'll get the new books uploaded to your pages and all that fun stuff. Anything else? Ryan, do you have any closing words of wisdom?
Get your butt in the seat and keep writing is what I think we all probably need to hear, except possibly Linda. You should take a break and go outside.
Yeah, thank you. I think I might.
Good. All right. Janet, do we need to have our business meeting, or Ricky, do we need to have our business meeting after this, or do we need to just, how do we need to do that?
I mean, what do we got? We got 11 people. I suppose we could give them the financial update. That's always good for folks to know. If you wanted to just give that information real quick, Janet.
Sure. Currently, we have $12,277.91 in the bank. And that's it.
That's good.
Yeah, and
how many members do we have?
Cindy,
do you have the membership numbers now?
I think last time I looked, I sent a report to Janet, but I think it's maybe 61 paid
Oh,
members.
that's good. Oh, that's
Oh,
good.
that's fantastic.
That's
We've
good.
gotten a couple of new people lately. One lady from Illinois, I think.
yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Good.
That's awesome.
so yeah, it's nice that our numbers are steady and growing throughout this pandemic. It's the virtual meetings, thanks to Kim, have been going great, and we will be discussing moving on, whether or not to stay digital, how long to stay digital, all that stuff in this afternoon's board meeting.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, then I think that we'll get updates to people on the anthology and everything later this weekend. And thank y'all all for coming.
I loved everybody's stories in the anthology. I thought they were really good.
Oh, good.
Thanks, Linda.
Everybody's was good.
So good. Yeah, if you haven't got a copy of the anthology yet, let us know, because you need one, and get online. And I may try to just bump that post up on our Facebook page again and make sure that there's a link, because they're so good this year. So, All right. Well, I'm going to say goodbye. I'm going to end the recording and end the meeting. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.